Hi, students. So I'm going to have to make this video for you um, for class today instead of having a physical class because my youngest is sick and needs to go to the doctor. And I am the only one who can take her. So uh, I'm sorry. I tried to get a different time from the doctor, but um, since it's flu season, there's only one time available today. Uh, so, um, I think what I'm going to use this time to talk to you about is Plato's Cave. Uh, the cave is kind of the the poetic version of the divided line, or it is poetically related to the divided line. Um, Remember how we ended the class talking about true myth and false myth? So, this would be an example of a really important myth for Plato, one that's accurate and one that really helps us to be able to talk about important things that sound really different when they're just explained in abstract ways. So, um, I think the story of the cave is kind of fun to walk through in class, so I regret that we're doing it this way. But kind of picture this in your mind. Um, there's a cave, and it's deep into the ground, it's hidden away from all light. Um, so, of course, there's no source of light in there but whatever it is humans make. In this case, fire. Uh, so once you get to the back of the cave, the way it's structured is there is a wall, kind of a bit of a distance from the very back of the cave, where the cave ends. It's a constructed wall. So you have the cave wall, the back cave wall, which is natural, but then you have the constructed wall, which is going to be a ways back from the cave back wall itself, uh, but closer to that, much closer to that than it is to the opening of the cave. So it's in the area that would be naturally dark. And the reason that it has any light at all is because behind it is that fire we talked about. The wall is low enough that the fire is able to cast light um, all around that space, um, and enough that it could be used to put shadows on the cave back wall. How would I draw this out? You guys probably get it, but just in case it's not making a ton of sense. Um, okay. So, uh, what's the best way to do this? So this is the cave opening, right? So that we're coming in here from the real world into the cave. Um, did I do this wrong? Wait, excuse me. Okay, this is the cave opening, right? See, it says cave opening. We're coming in from the real world into the cave. Here's that fire I was telling you about. There's the wall. Okay, the human-made wall. This is the back of the cave, kind of where things stop. So this is the natural stopping point underground. This is the entry point. Hopefully this makes a little more sense now. Now, here where the wall is, there are people chained to it, and they're chained facing the back of the wall. So for some reason in this cave, there are people chained there. And they're chained away from the cave opening, so they don't even know anything about the outside world. They've been here at this wall, chained to it since forever. Their reality is then everything they see here on the back cave wall. That's what reality is to them. The space in between them and the back of the cave wall. So their chains, all of that appears natural to them. It appears like that's the way reality is. Even though over here is reality. Like the trees, the grass, the water, the air, all of that is there. But they know nothing of it. Everything they know is just what they've been allowed to see. And since they've been here since birth, all they've been allowed to see is what's here. Now, there's a group of people called the puppet masters. They're not chained to the wall. They inhabit the cave too, but they're not chained to anything. What they do is they create what the people chained to the wall think is reality by holding up objects in front of this fire and making them appear as shadows on the wall. And one of the things to draw from this, right, is that there's puppet masters of reality. People who are making things seem to be real and essential and natural that are not at all whatsoever. They're completely constructed. And they can do this because they're taking advantage of people who have nothing to compare their reality to. These people who've been chained here, it's not their fault that they don't know there's another way to be. They're kind of victims of circumstance in that sense, and they're not lying or being dishonest when they say that this is what's reality. The people who are lying and being dishonest are the puppet masters because they know there's a different reality. They know that what these people think is reality is fake, and they also know that what these people think is reality is a product of their choices and their manipulations. The other thing is, if all your reality is, and this is very like divided line, if all your reality is shadows, you're missing details. So like if I held up a plate, right? If I was a puppet master, I held up a plate and you're there chained to that human-made wall looking at the images on the back of the cave, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between that object like being, for example, a plate or a ball, right? They both look like circles. Those are really different things though. But you're not just limited by the fact that your reality is constrained by the fact that someone else is making it for you and the fact that they've chained you to a wall. You're also limited by what shadows allow you to see. Shadows allow you to see very little. So even if for some reason, like you were a super intelligent person and you spent a lot of time studying those shadows, it wouldn't really matter. There's only so much information you can get from those shadows. And the world that you come up with from interpreting those shadows, the way you justify or explain anything, you could be really smart. You could be really good at interpreting those shadows and coming up with complex systems about those shadows. But are they going to have any relationship to reality? No, because again, you could be really smart, but you're very limited just by what you're being given to start with. So that's kind of what it is like to be in the cave and what it's like to have knowledge in the cave. The things you call knowledge by no fault of your own are not knowledge. They're very, very, very weakly correlated to reality. And the systems that you create based on that are similarly very, very weakly correlated to reality. In the cave, it's natural, as it is in any place where we have society, to come up with things we praise and blame, things we consider honorable and dishonorable. Let's say that there's even like awards we give each other for having the best way of understanding those shadows. Are any of those awards related to reality? Does it matter if you're the best interpreter of shadows? Not really, because those shadows don't mean anything. But the virtues of that world, the praises of that world seem and feel very real. And you can't blame people for that. Well, you can't blame the people chained to the wall. They have no way of knowing better. You can blame the people that have chained them there. Now, the sort of movement of the cave is to move out of it. There's one person that gets free of their chain somehow. We're not really sure how. Like, there's different ways of interpreting that part, but they get out and they're shocked by the difference between what they think reality is and what it actually is. First of all, once they're free, of course, they realize they can turn their head. That's something they've never been able to do before. And that in itself is a revelation. And that movement is painful and also something that they want to do because they've got to know the truth. They've got to keep going. Same thing when they pass the fire. The fire, looking at it directly, is going to hurt their eyes, of course, because they're in greater darkness. But the pain of that is worth it. And over time, as they're getting out of the cave, their eyes adjust to the increasing light, so that pain starts to go away. Their neck and their limbs adjust to movement. So they get better, right, as they keep going, as they get closer to the truth. And eventually they make it out of the cave. Now, when they first get out of the cave, they cannot see anything clearly. Again, because they've been in a cave. So if their eyes eventually adjusted to the level of light in the cave, that's not going to be good enough for like being in the sun. So when they're out there in the sun for the first time, they kind of can't handle it. They have to start off by looking at the ground, and then by looking at reflections in the water. And from there, they can work up to looking at objects like trees, and eventually they're able to look at the sun. So don't actually look at the sun. That's not a good idea. But yeah, that is another example of the relationship between how painful it is to grow toward what is true, but how your nature and your mind accommodate and expand in light of it. Now, when you are there and you've adjusted, you first of all are euphoric because you're inhabiting the real world, which is where you belong. And you have freedom. You have freedom of movement. You have freedom of thought. You have beauty, right? The beauty of nature around you. And you can reflect and see things clearly, and you don't have the physical pain you had from being a prisoner before either. However, um, there's a drawback. On the one hand, nobody who has left the cave and made it, right, adjusted all the way, would ever desire to go back to life in the cave. If you ask them about that life, it will be horrific to them in ways that they never understood before. They might have told you they were happy when they were chained in the cave, partly because they didn't know that there was a kind of life where you weren't chained. They didn't know that there was a kind of life that wasn't a shadow world. Now they do know. So now they know that what they thought was happiness or contentment earlier was evil and abusive. And they would never want to return to that. Like, that's probably a great source of fear and anger for them. It would be like moving from having a healthy diet of delicious and nutritious foods that give them energy and strength and pleasure, and then being asked, hey, do you want to eat shit? That's just horrifying. However, they were there, they were in a society. They have friends there, family. They can't stop thinking about them. They can't stop thinking about what they inhabit and the torture it is. And so it's very difficult for them, after having been out of the cave and even seeing the sun, to say, wow, forget about them, right? As you experience the freedom and the joy and beauty, you think about everyone behind you that you left who does not, right? And you remember what you suffered there. So you remember their suffering. And Plato thinks that if you see the sun and you really see it and the beauty and meaning of that world you're inhabiting, you really see it, right? That your soul has no choice but to go back into the cave. When you've encountered the good that directly and enjoyed it that directly and have seen the way it changes your life, the good itself is so, like, the way you kind of know someone has really got it is that they can't let other people live without it. Okay, there's not someone who could have really gone through this whole process, like fully gone through it, truly gone through it, and let go of the darkness of the cave and took on all of the light of the good. There's no one who could have gone through that process and not conclude in the end, ultimately, hey, we need to go back, right? Because that's what justice requires. You couldn't really have a world of beauty that you enjoy, that means everything to you, that has healed you, and know that you've left behind a world of people you love who suffer while you benefit. So Plato's escaped prisoner always goes back to the cave. Always goes back to the cave. But there's a major risk, which is that when they go back into the cave and they try to tell the people what's happening, the people that they loved, hey, everything you saw is a lie. You're not free. You're prisoners. There's this whole other world. These shadows are lies. the praises that we have around these shadows, the truths we have around them, the judgments, the virtues, the vices, all of that is fake. Okay. There's a really good chance that some of the cave dwellers, not necessarily all of them, but some of them, will see you as a threat, as someone who's crazy, has lost their mind, and also who in coming to like change their life is coming to take everything good that they have and destroy it. And the person who returns to the cave is going to be killed, probably. Because the people in the cave don't have what it takes to understand what it is the escaped prisoner who's returned has to tell them. They don't have the resources to understand it because of how abused and malformed and deprived they are. Right. So Plato is going to say, that's what philosophy does for you. It takes you out of the cave, and it's a painful process. And it's a process. It's not all at once. But when you've seen the good and when you love it, well, it's irresistible. And you are going to go back. You're going to go to your society and you're going to tell them what you know and what you've learned. But that makes you a threat to the society. And that's the story of Plato's Cave. There's a lot of ethical problems that presents, and a lot of sort of sad, perhaps fated outcomes that are connected to it. And again, you have this problem we've been dealing with for the whole Republic, that, you know, it's really possible that what it takes to accept or love justice and to practice it is, in a way, maybe partly or wholly outside of our control, right? He's raising that again. I ultimately think that he says, no, we do have some control, but that's also raised by the cave.